The Washington morning buzzed with political tension. On the marble steps of the Capitol, press crews adjusted lenses, interns scurried like ants, and a charged silence hovered over the East Lawn. Word had spread, a live national debate was about to erupt, not between party leaders, but between two of the sharpest tongues in American politics. Karoline Leavitt, sharp-suited and steel-eyed, stepped out of a black SUV. At 29, the New Hampshire firebrand had already scorched more podiums than most lifetime politicians. Her silver cross gleamed under her blazer lapel, subtle yet unwavering. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her mission was clear: confront Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez live on C-SPAN over the new federal equity education bill. Inside the chamber, Alexandria, AOC, Ocasio-Cortez was already prepping, flipping through handwritten notes in the green room, lips pressed tight. She knew Leavitt wasn't just another right-wing talking head. She was articulate, ruthless, and carried the full backing of the new conservative base, Trump included. Producers signaled, 5 minutes to air. Leavitt's heels echoed down the marble hallway as she approached the prep area. No handshake. No greeting. Just eye contact. The kind that could cut glass. AOC finally broke the silence. You came to grandstand or debate? Karoline's lips curved into a slight grin. I came to finish your sentence, before you twist it into policy. And with that, the fire met gasoline. Across America, televisions flickered on. Phones buzzed. Clips from their past interviews began circulating. One side remembered Leavitt calling out bureaucratic hypocrisy in a congressional hearing, the other recalled AOC's passionate speech defending marginalized students. As the debate countdown hit midnight, the screen faded from black, and the moderator's voice rang out. Today, two bold voices collide on Capitol View. Please welcome Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Leavitt nodded coolly. AOC exhaled once, then smiled wide. The nation leaned in. The debate began civil, at least for the first 30 seconds. AOC opened confidently, outlining the equity education bill as a path toward opportunity for all students regardless of race, zip code, or legacy wealth. Her voice was steady, polished. She used terms like structural disadvantage and educational justice, each phrase drawing subtle nods from the live audience. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't here to nod. She waited, smiling just enough to unnerve. And when it was her turn, her voice was crisp, unshaken. So, let me get this straight. You're asking taxpayers in rural America to bankroll DEI consultants in San Francisco schools, while our own kids can't afford school lunches or see a nurse twice a week? She didn't wait for permission to continue. This isn't justice. It's ideological theater, funded by people who actually still believe in merit. The studio air tightened. The moderator blinked. AOC's eyebrows arched. Karoline, AOC shot back, you talk about merit like everyone starts at the same line. But where was your outrage when private schools got federal bailouts during COVID while inner-city kids didn't even have Wi-Fi? Karoline leaned in, steely-eyed. I'm outraged every day, for every American student stuck in a system built on politics instead of performance. But your solution is more politics. You're not fixing the system, you're weaponizing it. Boom. Twitter lit up. Hashtags like hashtag Leavitt vs AOC, hashtag Bronx vs Granite, and hashtag Red Fire Blue Storm began trending before the moderator could regain control. Behind the cameras, producers whispered frantically. Ratings were spiking. YouTube stream comments exploded. Karoline just nuked that argument, clashed with AOC holding her ground like a queen. But no one could look away. The two women weren't talking over each other, they were slicing through ideology with surgical precision. And for once, America wasn't watching two parties, they were watching two worldviews collide in real time. The moderator attempted to pivot. Let's move to charter schools, should public funds support them? But both women ignored him. They weren't done yet. AOC jabbed. You represent an administration that spent more time banning books than funding classrooms. Karoline smiled coldly. And you represent a generation that thinks banning failing ideas is oppression. The chamber buzzed. Neither would blink. And this was only round one. The moderator's voice trembled slightly now. We'll shift to climate education. But the audience was no longer listening to him. They were locked on the tension radiating from the stage. Karoline Leavitt had leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes blazing like someone who had just dared the storm to strike. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, meanwhile, was perfectly upright, her posture radiating control, as if she were restraining herself from erupting, on camera. Karoline struck first. You use classrooms as battlegrounds for your worldview. You're not teaching kids science. You're teaching them shame, about being American, about energy independence, about success. AOC inhaled sharply. She turned her full attention to Karoline. I'd rather teach them truth than lies wrapped in patriotism. The world is burning, your party wants to hand out matches. The crowd gasped. That line would be in headlines. Karoline didn't flinch. You preach apocalypse, then blame farmers in Nebraska while flying private to climate panels in Europe. A visible crack broke across AOC's calm expression. The mask of polished composure slipped, just for a second. Enough for millions of Americans to screenshot it in real time. Karoline wasn't done. And let's talk about accountability. You rail against Wall Street, but your campaign fundraisers read like a Goldman Sachs Christmas list. That stung. Even the moderator blinked. Let's keep it policy-focused, ladies. But ladies didn't apply anymore. These were warriors, and the battlefield was set. AOC fought back hard. You call me fake, but you're parroting talking points from a man who tried to dismantle democracy. At least I stand for something. Karoline fired without pause. I stand for the Constitution. Not rewriting it every time it disagrees with your Instagram feed. Boom. Laughter and applause erupted. Behind the stage, aides were texting each other. Leavitt's killing it. AOC better counter strong. This is war. And in the digital trenches, it was chaos. X, formerly Twitter, exploded with takes. TikTokers clipped and remixed the clash. YouTube streams titled "Leavitt Shreds AOC Live" went viral within 15 minutes. Reels of Karoline's jab, "I stand for the Constitution," started looping under the American flag. But something else began to emerge beneath the surface. Two stories. Two Americas. AOC, raised in the Bronx, fueled by progressive fire. Karoline, New Hampshire roots, trained in conservative grit. The debate was no longer about policy. It was about truth, whose truth gets to shape the next generation. And both women knew it. The studio felt like a courtroom now, except there was no judge, only the verdict of millions watching live. AOC adjusted her mic, tone shifting, calmer now, almost surgical. You've got a script, Karoline, and it's cute. But don't confuse a communications degree and a Fox internship with leadership. Some of us built our platforms, not inherited them. Karoline blinked once. That one hit personal, but she didn't back down. And some of us don't need to turn every cause into a personal brand. You went from bartender to Congress, sure. But what have you actually built besides a TikTok following and a movement that eats its own? Gasps rippled. Even AOC stiffened. Karoline continued. You claim to fight for the working class, yet every time you get pushback, it's suddenly violence or oppression. Maybe real leadership isn't just about outrage. Maybe it's about outcomes. Now AOC leaned forward, voice steady but tight. Do you even know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still be broke? To watch your neighborhood flood while billionaires dodge taxes? You want to talk outcomes? Tell that to the kid in Queens who can't breathe because your energy independence keeps coal plants open. Karoline. And tell that same kid his school can't afford math books because your side spent $60,000 on anti-bias workshops that don't improve test scores. They weren't just debating. They were swinging. Each word was a punch, calibrated and personal. Each glare a silent warning, step back, or I'll take you apart. The audience was silent, hanging on every syllable. Every eye, from the far-left camera to the moderator's sweat-soaked notes, locked on two women standing at the apex of America's ideological divide. And yet, something deeper began to emerge. This wasn't just red versus blue anymore. This was legacy versus disruption. Establishment versus insurgency. The polished rise versus the fierce climb. Even critics began admitting online. Love or hate her, Leavitt came prepared. AOC underestimated her, and it shows. TikTok was flooded with side-by-side edits. Instagram stories split-screened them like prize fighters. Conservative outlets crowned Karoline the underdog champ. Progressive pundits warned AOC was losing ground, fast. And behind it all, in a quiet control room upstairs, a network executive whispered to his producer. "We need a part 2. Karoline kept her eyes locked on AOC, not blinking. The room had turned into a furnace of unspoken tension, and neither woman was stepping back. "Not now." "I respect your story," Karoline said, voice steady. "I really do. But struggle doesn't give anyone a monopoly on truth. You keep using your past as armor, while shielding policies that don't work." AOC leaned back slightly, her brows raised. "And what do you offer? Another politician quoting talking points from oil lobby memos?" Karoline's response was calm, almost too calm. "I offer balance, energy independence and clean innovation. Border control and compassion. Not performative activism with hashtags and no results." A sharp murmur ran through the audience. Even the moderator froze. This wasn't just political theater anymore, this was two political philosophies embodied in flesh and fire, clashing before the nation. AOC's smile faded. "I organize. I legislate. I don't just post press releases and call it courage." Karoline's retort came razor-sharp. "You post selfies in handcuffs that weren't even locked." The crowd erupted. Cameras swung wildly. Producers in the booth yelled into headsets. Social media lit up like a fireworks display. Twitter. Leavitt just body slammed AOC on the fake arrest. Did AOC just get fact-checked to her face, with receipts? On X, formerly Twitter, the hashtag Leavitt vs AOC trended within 3 minutes. Even progressives in the comment threads whispered, "She's hitting harder than expected." Karoline took a breath, carefully. She knew not to gloat. Not yet. She turned to the camera. "This isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who delivers. I grew up in New Hampshire. My family worked with their hands. You want to talk working class? We didn't have time for politics. We had bills. We had gas prices. We had dignity." AOC shot back, almost with a crack in her voice. "Then don't pretend the people behind you aren't billionaires. You talk about family values, but whose family are you protecting? Mine, or the donors writing your check?" The temperature dropped. That hit deep. Karoline paused. But didn't retreat. "I'm protecting a system that lets any family rise. Including yours. And if you want to burn that system down, just admit it." Silence. Audible. Heavy. The moderator finally interjected, "Okay, we need a break." But the damage, or impact, had already been done. Some in the audience stood and clapped. Others booed. But no one looked away. The break came, but the tension didn't leave the room. Backstage, Karoline stood alone, staring at her reflection in the green room mirror. Her blazer was crisp, her expression unshaken, but her heart was racing. Not from fear, but from purpose. From clarity. She hadn't just held her ground against AOC, she had commanded it. Across the hall, AOC sat quietly with her team. A makeup artist tried retouching her eyeliner, but she waved her off. Her mind was racing too, calculating, analyzing. She'd underestimated Karoline. The girl wasn't just media polish and GOP talking points. She had teeth. "I'm not losing this moment," Alexandria muttered. Not to her. Back on stage, the studio lights hit harder. Round 2 was about to begin. The moderator looked rattled but resumed with forced calm. "We're back. And I'd like to move to policy specifics." AOC cut in before he could finish. "Let's talk reality. Because that's what's missing here. You speak for a world that's never had to choose between insulin and rent. I live in a district where that happens every day." Karoline didn't flinch. "Then why does your party keep making insulin more expensive with red tape? You want to help people? Start by fixing the mess you helped create." The audience leaned in again. The crowd was no longer neutral. Cheers and jeers came in waves, depending on which woman was speaking. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a culture war on camera. AOC pointed, "You defend corporations, not the people." Karoline fired back, "I defend jobs. Freedom. Opportunity. I don't make everything about grievance." The moderator finally shouted, "Ladies, please." But they weren't listening. Neither were the viewers at home. Because both sides, right and left, had just seen something raw and rare. 2 women. Both fighters. Both fearless. But only one would win the moment. Karoline took a deep breath, then asked AOC directly. "If you had to choose, your platform or your power, what would you give up first?" It was surgical. Philosophical. Personal. AOC blinked. Just once. She had no ready answer. Karoline stepped back from the mic. Let the silence say the rest. The studio was electric. No script. No safety net. Just raw conviction and the sound of 2 Americas colliding. Karoline adjusted the mic and spoke low, slow. Her words weighted like bricks. "You talk about the working class like it's a monologue. Where I come from, people don't have time to march. They wake up at 5 a.m., work until their backs give out, and pray they can still afford groceries. You want to talk struggle? They live it, and they don't scream about it." AOC's jaw tightened. But she wasn't backing down. "You keep talking about where I come from like pain is exclusive to your district. I'm from the Bronx, Karoline. I've waited tables, cleaned apartments, dodged eviction. I don't need a lecture from someone whose campaign is bankrolled by hedge fund cash." That stung. And it landed. But Karoline stayed centered. Calm. Almost unnervingly so. "Then maybe you should understand better," she said, her tone like steel beneath velvet. "Because the way you legislate, it doesn't match the woman you say you were. You got to Congress, and you forgot what the rent feels like." A hush fell. Even the moderator looked stunned. AOC turned sharply toward Karoline. Her voice rose, not shrill, but fiery. "I fight for people who've never had a voice. You fight for the people who already own the microphone." Karoline stepped forward. "No, I fight to give back the microphone. To parents who can't speak up at school board meetings without being called extremists. To waitresses who can't say no to vaccine mandates without losing their jobs. To women, who are sick of being told they're not progressive enough if they don't chant your slogans." For a moment, AOC's expression faltered. The applause wasn't just coming from the right anymore. The audience was splitting, again. But not neatly. There were gasps from both sides. Claps from unexpected corners. The show's live comments section exploded. Leavitt just broke the fourth wall. AOC looks cornered for once. This isn't left versus right, it's truth versus ego. Karoline's voice softened, just slightly. You once inspired a lot of young women, she said. I was one of them. Until I realized your message was about control, not courage. Boom. No yelling. No insult. Just truth served ice cold. And AOC, normally quick with fire, said nothing. Just a flicker in her eyes. Rage? Regret? Recognition? Nobody could tell. But the moment burned itself into the feed. The moderator finally said, "We'll take one last break before closing statements." But the battle had already been written in history, tweet by tweet, reaction by reaction. And it wasn't over yet. The final segment began in silence. Cameras panned across the studio, catching every clenched jaw, every eye trained on the two women who had just redefined political confrontation. The moderator, visibly rattled, cleared his throat. Closing thoughts. 1 minute each. He turned to AOC first. She leaned in, voice calm but simmering. You've heard a lot tonight. But let me be clear, this country is not suffering from too much progress. It's suffering from leaders who romanticize the past. Who want to drag us back to a time when too many of us were silent, unseen, and powerless. That's not patriotism. That's regression. I fight to move us forward, together. A tight, strategic smile. Applause from her side. But not deafening. The camera swung to Karoline. She didn't smile. She didn't posture. She spoke. Power is not giving louder speeches. It's listening to the voices no one wants to hear. She paused. My generation was told we had to pick a side. That if we questioned lockdowns, we were anti-science. If we believed in borders, we were xenophobes. If we prayed in public, we were the problem. You taught us division, then blamed us for it. Murmurs in the crowd. Phones lifted, recording every word. Karoline stepped closer to the mic. I'm not here to be the face of conservatism. I'm here to be a mirror. For millions of Americans who were told to shut up, sit down, and nod along while elites redefined their values. Then she looked directly at AOC. You say I romanticize the past? No. I remember it. When faith, family, and freedom weren't punchlines. When being a strong woman didn't mean parroting a party line. AOC raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Karoline went on. I'm not fighting against progress. I'm fighting for a version of it that doesn't erase people like my grandmother, who fled communism. People like my brother, who served overseas. Women like my mom, who ran a small business without a government lifeline. The air thickened. No cheering. No clapping. Just the silence of a crowd hit by something unexpected. Conviction that didn't scream. Karoline finished. This isn't left or right anymore. It's real versus fake. And I won't be quiet just because the script says I should. She stepped back. And for the first time all night, AOC didn't respond. She just stared. Calculating. Rattled. The studio lights dimmed for the outro. But no one moved. Because no matter what happened next, the war of words had a clear winner in the room. And everyone watching knew it. The credits didn't roll. Not yet. The cameras were off, but the energy in the room was radioactive. Backstage, Karoline walked past producers, stagehands, and makeup artists, some staring, others nodding silently. She didn't need cheers. She had impact. In a quiet corner near the emergency exit, her assistant handed her a bottle of water and whispered, "You just made national headlines." Karoline took a slow sip, her thoughts still echoing the final words she spoke on stage. Her phone buzzed. A dozen missed calls. Over 100 messages. She opened one from her father. Your grandfather would have been proud. You stood tall. No fear. Her throat tightened, but she blinked back emotion. Now wasn't the time for tears. It was time to prepare for the storm. A few yards away, AOC stood with her team. Her face calm, but her arms crossed tighter than usual. She spoke quietly, fast. Don't post anything yet. Let's see how it plays. Her strategist replied, we're getting blowback. Not from the right, from independents. AOC frowned. She's dangerous. Too composed. They'll confuse control with character. She looked toward the shadows. Karoline was watching her. For a split second, their eyes met. No words. Just understanding. This wasn't personal. It was deeper. A cultural collision long overdue. Back outside, headlines were already swarming the web. Leavitt's calm fury leaves AOC off balance. Young conservative versus progressive icon, a new era of debate? No one expected that ending. But Karoline wasn't celebrating. She stood by the curb under the studio lights, alone now, wind teasing strands of her hair. She pulled out a small silver pendant from under her blazer, her mother's cross, and held it tight for a moment. Not as a statement. As a reminder. That you can speak softly and still shake mountains. That real power doesn't shout, it stands. And tonight, she hadn't just stood her ground. She shifted it. Washington never sleeps, especially not after a broadcast like that. By sunrise, the internet was ablaze. Clips of the debate racked up millions of views in hours. TikTok was split into factions. Twitter/X boiled with takes. Network anchors scrambled to book follow-ups, and both women were now trending, but for very different reasons. Karoline Leavitt didn't bask in the spotlight. She went back to work. In her modest office lit by the pale morning sun, she scrolled through feedback, noting not the applause, but the confusion, the curiosity, even the rare confessions from viewers who said, I didn't agree with you, but I listened. She smiled, not because she'd won, but because she'd cut through. In a world where shouting is currency, she used clarity like a scalpel. Meanwhile, in a swankier corner of D.C., AOC sat with her inner circle. Her team ran numbers, analyzed sentiment, tweaked their messaging. She wasn't supposed to land that hard, one aide muttered. AOC leaned back, quiet for once. Maybe the firebrand from the Bronx had finally met her match, not in rage, but in resolve. And maybe America needed both of them. Not to agree. But to clash, clearly, so the country could see the difference. One woman shouted for the future. The other stood for the past. But somewhere in the middle was a generation watching, and deciding. In an era of noise, sometimes it takes two voices, one blazing with fire, the other rooted like stone, to reveal what truly matters. Karoline Leavitt didn't come to play politics. She came to remind people they still had the right to believe what they believe. And when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez met her on that stage, it wasn't just a debate. It was a collision. One that echoed beyond the studio, into the soul of a nation still deciding who it wants to be. Red state heat met Bronx fire, and no one walked away untouched.